Fun with UFOs. I'm Don Paul, and welcome to the Don Paul Podcast, bits o' blather on weather, climate, and some humor. And today I'm going to go a little bit outside of my lane, outside of meteorology and climate science, and bring you something which, in one sense, violates a ground rule I laid down for myself over the weekend. And that is, I am not here on this podcast to pick fights and win arguments. But this time around, I'm going to give some supportive evidence for arguments raised by much more learned scientists, starting way back in my college years when I watched a televised lecture by a Rutgers professor who postulated that the probabilities of Earth having been visited by extraterrestrial life were infinitesimally tiny, if not impossible, incredibly close to it. And that lecture kind of moved me, but then it was reawakened in my mind when, during the Cosmos years of Carl Sagan, Dr. Sagan also said he thought the universe mathematically almost certainly was teeming with life, but that the probabilities of any of it coming here to visit us were incredibly infinitesimal and small. Now, what led to me writing an essay on this topic in the Buffalo News back in 2019 was a goofy discussion I saw on a Facebook page from my hometown, North Bergen, New Jersey. That's the part of Jersey where a lot of people pronounced it North Bergen, New Jersey. I had a shop teacher named Mr. Heuser who said it was North Bergen, and he pronounced learn, loin, oil was Earl. I have the feeling Mr. Heuser didn't know how to pronounce his own name, and he was really Mr. Herzer. But let's get serious. Someone had posted newspaper articles on the North Bergen page that UFO sightings in North Hudson Park were repeated in the 70s, 80s, and even the 90s. North Hudson Park in North Bergen lies right across the Hudson River from Manhattan. If there were alien visits, I guess they might have been trying to decipher sounds made by earthlings who all happen to sound just like Tony Soprano. Seriously, folks, as Steve Allen used to say, most sightings can be explained. Even so, many sightings have not been explained and remain unidentified. The logical leap from that UFO can't be explained by me or anybody else I know, so it must be an alien spacecraft. That's not exactly an exercise in logic. It's not mathematically impossible, but as I will attempt to show, it is emphatically unlikely. Now, the known universe, as far as we know from our more advanced telescopes, the Hubble and the James Webb telescopes, uh, the most distant objects we've observed are called quasars. We view them as they appeared 13.8 billion years ago. Now, light from these quasars took that long to reach these telescopes. If one of them exploded and disappeared 10 billion years ago, if humans were still around, we won't know it for another 3.8 billion years. That's traveling at the speed of light, 6 trillion miles a year. And beyond that, most galaxies we've been looking at are still moving away from one another. The universe is expanding. Now, when Carl Sagan was alive at Cornell, he thought there were hundreds of billions of galaxies. Now, more recent evidence gathered from these new superior technologies suggests there may be at least 10 times more galaxies than that. In 2016, deep field images from the Hubble telescope had already suggested there may be 2 trillion galaxies. The Milky Way is estimated to have more than 100 billion stars. And going with some smooth data estimates, a Cornell astronomer, David Kornreich, published very approximate numbers on space.com. He used a rough estimate of what he now feels is likely that there are 10 trillion galaxies times a minimum of 100 billion stars per galaxy. So the number of stars estimated using that kind of equation, if it is an equation, is 1 with 24 zeros after it, a number called 1 septillion. That doesn't even show up in the tax return of Elon Musk. That's a big number. It's 1 quadrillion in the European system. Kornreich estimated that number, 10 trillion galaxies, may still be gross underestimation as more detailed looks at the universe keep showing more and more galaxies that we didn't know were there. Now, even assuming the number of stars with planets which support life would be a much smaller minority of that septillion number, that number would still be very large. And having looked briefly at the scales of time and space, we'll move on to probabilities of extraterrestrial visits to us, to our planet. If the universe is teeming with life, we can look to our closest neighboring galaxy, Andromeda. It's 2 million light years away. That's 2 million times 6 trillion. And Andromeda has a lot more stars than the Milky Way's 100 billion, has well over 200 billion stars. Assuming advanced life is no more uncommon in the Andromeda than the Milky Way galaxy, why would a civilization in Andromeda travel 2 million light years when other life forms would be closer in their own backyard, the Andromeda? Now, all this assumes interstellar travel at the speed of light is feasible for living creatures. There are some complex laws of physics which suggest it may not be feasible for living creatures to travel near the speed of light, but we'll put that aside for now. And we'll also stick just with the Milky Way. Astrophysicist Frank Drake is one of the founders of SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Life. He developed what's called the Drake equation, estimating the odds of finding intelligent life in the universe. Now, he was always very much an optimist on extraterrestrial life, as Sagan was. However, in this complex screening for what are the minimal requirements for such advanced civilizations to evolve, we're talking about advanced civilization, not just planets with life. His most optimistic estimate is the possibility of about 50,000 advanced civilizations in the Milky Way. And if these civilizations were neatly equidistant from each other, that would be about 2,000 light years apart from one another. Nice equal spacing. Now, next question. How would any extraterrestrials know we are here? Well, they might get an idea from detecting our planet as having an atmosphere and composition which would support life, as we're beginning to do with so many exoplanets orbiting other stars. But planet Earth would be one of so many other exoplanets to examine. The odds that one of these advanced civilizations had found the planet and already made a trip are pretty darn low. And then when you jump ahead to other questions, how would extraterrestrials know humans are here after they've figured out this is a planet that might support life? Things get really, really tough. City lights weren't around until the end of the 19th century, and they're almost certain to be invisible from other star systems because there's so much interstellar dust they can't be seen. But even if aliens had some kind of observational technology where they could be seen, it's still been that short period of time in which they've been out there. A much more likely route for the transmission of evidence of us is broadcasting. Broadcast transmissions do travel at the speed of light, and our earliest transmission was around 1920 from KDKA in Pittsburgh. That's a little more than 100 light years out into space that these earliest broadcasts have traveled. However, using the Drake equation, they would still have another 1900 years to go to reach another civilized target. But suppose the 2000 light year hypothesis is wrong in our case. Tossing that hypothesis aside, our broadcasts have reached about 15,000 stars. The Planetary Society, that's a scientific group, estimates that our broadcast signals have certainly become very weak. And keep in mind, these were not focused narrow beam broadcasts. They were just put out there. And as they travel farther and farther into space, they get weaker and weaker. One physicist did some math and interesting postulating and found trying to hear a KDKA broadcast in another planet on another star system around such a star would be like trying to detect the ripples of a pebble dropped in California waters off Santa Monica Beach with a detector in Japan. Now, what are the odds among the small number of stars there are planets with advanced life amongst the stars reached by broadcast? What are the odds any advanced life has the means to hear these incredibly weak signals at all? And then, what are the odds that a civilization existing in this small group has mastered interstellar travel, if it can be mastered? Next, you have to ask, why would such a civilization, if they did all that, expend the vast amounts of energy to visit Earth? And there's no question in physics, it is a vast amount of energy, whatever propulsion system you use, that would have to be employed to visit Earth. Why would they do all that and then never land and show themselves? Human hubris, self importance. That's what makes us think we're really something special. But biology, chemistry, physics, and math make it far more likely we're not so special as we think if the universe is teeming with life, as it likely is. Besides that, the idea we've been visited many, many times, North Bergen or not, when each voyage is a massive undertaking, that idea is ludicrous when you think about it. Remember, in the past, these sightings were occurring on a daily basis when flying saucers were all the hysterical rage starting in the late 40s through the 50s and even into the 60s. Between nearly all possible civilizations having no idea we exist and the incredible odds against interstellar travel emanating from a nearby star system to Earth, I'm pretty confident no aliens have visited North Bergen. That proportion of UFOs which remain unidentified remain just that, unidentified. And two basic concepts do get confused amongst many UFO believers. The universe is teeming with life, and it's arrogant to think we're the only ones out there. True. But that has almost nothing to do with the probabilities of any of that life coming here to visit us for all the reasons I've tried to lay out for you. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode and let me know how you feel. The Spotify podcast gives you the ability to interact with me or give me suggestions on future topics. I hope you will follow and share. And if I've gotten any of you UFO believers angry, well, that really wasn't my purpose, but I bet I have. I will talk to you again very soon.